Chapter 1: The Lucifer Complex and the Enemy Within. Psychological Reflections on Human Evil. Thomas Brunner recently compared my work with that of Thomas More and characterized it as follows. While Thomas More's books may be sifted down into the maxim, the sacred is closer than you think, Robert Moore's books exhibit the central idea that the demonic is closer than you think. This distinction misses some of the subtleties of my understanding of the important connection between the sacred and evil, but it does accurately characterize the urgency of my concern that we as individuals, groups, political and cultural tribes, and as a species quickly come to a more adequate dynamic understanding of the great solar fires that operate unconsciously within us to drive the increasing epidemics of personal and social evil. Why do I emphasize the dynamics of human evil in my research and teaching in psychology and spirituality? Because any approach to spirituality that hopes to confront the personal and communal destructiveness threatening the human future must avoid several traps. First, we must avoid the New Age tendency to deny the reality and power of evil. This widespread flight into the light is particularly tempting today because it requires so little in the way of either reflection or action. It enables continued denial of the seriousness of the situation and denial of how we as individuals participate in our own destruction and the destruction of our communities and planet. Second, we must avoid the historically popular tendency to find a human other to serve as a scapegoat for explanation of the impact of evil in our lives, one who can serve as a receptacle for our shadow projections and who, if they are imprisoned, tortured, burned, bombed, and so forth, can be used as ritual sacrificial victims to give us a bogus sense of mastery over our desperate situation. These misguided strategies were ably discussed by Ernst Becker in Escape from Evil and The Denial of Death. Racism, classism, anti-Semitism, religious bigotry, and other misguided tribalisms have majored in this seductive but demonic attempt to locate and suppress or destroy the toxins that afflict us. Sexism has been a historic and even more ubiquitous strategy for finding a scapegoat. Both men and women must share the responsibility for starting to break the historic pattern of blaming the other gender for human destructiveness and evil. As some feminist theorists have pointed out, the different genders may experience different patterns of temptation or vulnerability to various forms of sin or evil, but neither one should continue to explain evil by reference to gender. Both genders and persons of all classes, races, religions, and sexual preferences participate in the experience of evil, and all are responsible for its perpetuation. All must respond to the challenge of coming to an understanding of evil that is neither naive nor grounded in scapegoating of the other, but which may account for some of the forces of destructiveness that threaten to destroy us. What are the marks of human evil? Being able to talk with any authority about evil is not one of the strengths of modern, flatland, secular culture. Take, for example, the case of the Holocaust. Witness how difficult we have found it to face our tendency to split off our consciousness of the Holocaust, to avoid looking at it, to let our denial of the reality and power of its evil overwhelm us either by minimizing or trivializing the significance of the war against the Jews. Responses range from absolving the Germans of their responsibility for the Holocaust to forcing the German people to carry the collective shadow for the whole human species. We hate to admit that the genocidal impulse is species-wide. Even Hannah Arendt's emphasis on the banality of evil in the Holocaust experience has made it easier for us to engage in massive denial of the power and pervasiveness of radical evil in human experience. Modern theologians have, for the most part, been little help. Recent theology tends to discuss theosity. Can God be a good God, given the manifest evil in the world? Long discussions usually focus on the nature and limits of the power of God and whether or not God wills evil or merely permits it, willing or unwillingly. Thousands of pages elucidate the various perspectives one might take on such issues. Scholars with a philosophical bent may find some of these discussions interesting and provocative, but they tend not to be, as we say today, experience near. They seem rather to treat evil as if it were merely an interesting academic issue for discussion in graduate level seminars. This is a classic way of responding to evil by those who have not achieved an adequate warrior initiation. Contemporary philosophers and theologians differ from the shamans of tribal culture in their lack of maturation in the warrior line of psychological and spiritual development. In contrast to our modern clergy and psychotherapists, not to speak of our professors, the great tribal shamans knew that their roles as healers and spiritual leaders required them to be warriors as well. Tribal people also treated these issues in a sophisticated way in their mythologies. While we obviously need to get beyond the limitations of tribal perspectives, we also need to ask if there is not significant wisdom for us in the ancient narrative traditions about evil.